government counts the cost of rebuilding as Taiwan recovers from a devastating earthquake. Taiwan tests its newest anti-air missile system, but does it have what it takes to defend the country? President-elect Lai's cabinet is taking shape after new officials are welcomed into the administration. Plus, devotees brave high heat as they follow the sea goddess Mazu on her annual pilgrimage. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Liao with 30 minutes of the latest. Thanks for tuning in. This month's magnitude 7.2 earthquake in Hualien caused widespread damage to the region, and the impact of the quake was felt across the country. Work has now begun on figuring out just how much it will cost to rebuild, as John Van Trieste now reports.
Nearly 2 weeks after a violent earthquake shook Taiwan, cleanup is underway. 51 buildings are condemned and 92 declared unsafe across the country. And the government says it's arranging for housing and financial support for displaced people, including up to $140,000 in subsidies to strengthen buildings against future earthquakes. Amid all this spending, there's one thing some politicians want to know. Officials are still doing the math. But when it comes to some infrastructure, there are already guesses. These include the costs of reopening rockslide-hit Taroko National Park, important for the tourism-dependent economy of Hualien County near the epicenter.
我想最大的经费可能是交通部的部分啊，我们自己国家公园初估大概是会有超过10亿。
The plan is to gradually reopen the park in sections, helping to bring visitors back to the area's hotels. Plans to improve a key highway linking Hualien to the rest of the country are still on track. The highway is vulnerable to tremors and rock slides and was briefly cut off after this earthquake. An extended tunnel to shelter the motorway is among the improvements planned for completion in 2032.
今年2月虽然在环评的专案小组有很多意见，那我们现在已经收集意见，预定在4月就送进这个专案小组，然后转这个大会。那我们目标就完全都不变。
Questions about the total cost may take time to answer. But in the meantime, construction crews will have their hands full as Taiwan begins an expensive recovery. James Lin and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Aftershocks from the Hualien quake almost triggered a major power outage on Monday. Taoyuan's Datan power plant ground to a halt due to damage to its power units caused by tremors. A power crisis was averted thanks to backup supply from a hydropower plant and reduced power usage by big industrial consumers. Datan is Taiwan's largest gas-fired power plant and supplies electricity to the Taipei region. Israel is pledging to respond to Iran's drone and missile attack on the country. But with concerns of conflict escalation in the Middle East, the U.S. and its allies are looking to de-escalate tensions.
Days after an unprecedented missile attack by Iran, Israel vows to respond.
We are closely assessing the situation. We remain at our highest level of readiness. Iran will face the consequences for its actions. We will choose our response accordingly.
The damage from the attack has been labeled modest. Israeli officials claim 99% of the more than 300 missiles and drones sent towards the country were intercepted before they reached Israel's borders. But this first ever direct attack marks a major escalation from decades of simmering tensions between the two nations. And it's raising international concerns of a full-scale war in the Middle East. Leaders from across the globe are urging Israel to restrain from retaliating. While US President Joe Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu via phone call that the US would not support a counterattack on Iran.
Whether or not Israel responds to Iran's attack, of course, is something for Israel to discuss and to decide. As Secretary Austin has said, both publicly and privately, we don't want to see escalation.
Iran says the attack was in response to a strike on its consulate in Syria 2 weeks ago. They claimed the lives of 7 Iranian Revolutionary Guards, which it believes Israel was behind. Tehran says it gave advance notice to its allies and the US of its actions, and it now considers the matters closed, warning Israel against any plans to retaliate.
ما طبیعتاً این اقدام رو در چارچوب ایجاد بازدارندگی انجام دادیم و چنانچه ارتکاب دیگری صورت بگیره حتما اقدامات قاطع و محکمتری در جهت ایجاد بازدارندگی صورت خواهد گرفت.
But as Israel considers its next move, the US, its biggest ally, is focused on countering China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. Recently hosting a summit with leaders from Japan and the Philippines in Washington. It's also backing Ukraine's war with Russia and seeking to end conflict in Gaza. Facing less support from Washington and the prospect of a full-scale war could make all the difference in how Israel ultimately decides to respond to Iran. Delphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan has tested a new anti-air missile just one day after Israel used similar weapons to defend against the Iran attack. So what can Taiwan learn from Israel's defense systems? Hameo Khan takes a look.
This is Taiwan's newest domestically made weapon, the Lujian, or land sword missile. In a first-ever test, the weapon system hit all 3 targets within its 15-kilometer range. Defense analysts say it will help fill in a gap for the country's missile and air defense.
这15公里呢，可以弥补我们野战防空到中程防空之间的空域防空的不足。因为在5公里之外到50公里之间，这个空域呢，其实过往陆军野战防空来讲基本上它是能量是不到的。
Missile defense is a key aspect of Taiwan's plan to counter an invasion from China. China has one of the world's largest stockpiles of guided missiles, and analysts predict hundreds would be fired simultaneously in the first stages of a potential attack to overwhelm, then destroy Taiwan's defense infrastructure. This is known as a saturation attack, and it poses one of the biggest challenges for Taiwan's defense.
等到我们飞弹耗损到一个地步以后，弹药补充不上的时候，就有一个空档时间。那么如果说对方是用一种饱和攻击的一个方式的话，事实上面我们防卫的话，还是有相当的一个漏洞的。
Taiwan is now looking at how other countries like Israel and Ukraine handle such attacks. On Saturday, Iran launched over 300 drones and missiles into Israel. With the benefit of forewarning, Israel says it took down 99% of the incoming threats, minimizing their impact. Analysts say Taiwan could use a similar strategy by employing a variety of weapons to counter different threats at different distances. By combining systems like the US-made Stinger with a range of 5 kilometers, Taiwan's new land sword surface-to-air missile with a 15-kilometer range, and the US-made Patriot 3 defense system, which extends to 70 kilometers. Taiwan's military hopes to counter a wide variety of threats. But there's still a major concern: the cost.
With advanced ammunition, it also means higher cost. So it's really, I think Taiwan should make a cost-benefit analysis and think of maybe a combination of all those systems, or choose 1 or 2.
Taiwan has a limited military budget and can't afford to rely on missiles alone. That's why some analysts say that Taiwan needs to commit more resources towards integrating its different systems and making sure they work together efficiently. For example, cheaper bullet weapons that can be used to counter drones in place of expensive missiles.
Large and simple drones, like which unit price like 50K each, and the missile, it can a 10 gem missile round can, I don't know, maybe 1 million USD or less, but it's very expensive. So I think Taiwan still needs to invest in more cost-effective ways to deal with them, be it gun-based system.
As Taiwan's military works to balance costs with effectiveness, it will be keeping a close eye on how wars play out abroad, all with the hope of being ready for one closer to home. Kamashu and Hameoko for TaiwanPlus.
President-elect Lai Ching-te's cabinet is shaping up. The incoming premier has just welcomed 6 new officials into the country's next administration. Tiffany Wong reports.
Taiwan's new Premier Zuo Rongtai announced 6 new officials in charge of Taiwan's ministries and agencies along the theme of tech and economic development. Zuo said that he hoped these ministers would be able to help strengthen Taiwan's strategic industries, including semiconductors, AI, and communications, and would be able to help not only big companies, but also small and medium-sized enterprises as well as startups.
台湾已经在全球产业供应链当中扮演不可或缺的重要角色，掌握科技运用的速度，将会决定国家成长的速度。
Zuo announced Guo Zhihui as economics minister, Huang Yannan as digital minister, taking the position from notable hacker-turned-politician Audrey Tang, Liao Jingqing as head of National Development Council, and also put Wu Chengwen as the head of the National Science Council. Peng Jinglong was announced as head of the Financial Supervisory Commission, and Cheng Jingde is going to be the head of the Public Construction Commission. With just 1 month left to go before President-elect Lais is set to take office, there have been several announcements of cabinet members like these, but this time around, notably, there are no women on stage. Now, there are still a few more prominent positions we're looking out for. That's the Minister of Foreign Affairs as well as Minister of National Defense, and those are yet to be announced. Eason Chen and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is reckoning with its handling of sexual offenders after TV host Mickey Huang was charged with possessing child sexual abuse material. Chris Gorin looks at how the case highlights a global problem and what Taiwan can do about it.
TV host Mickey Huang was first embroiled in Taiwan's Me Too movement last June, after 2 women claimed he sexually assaulted them when they were 17. Investigators later found 7 explicit videos depicting minors as young as 12 on his computer. The findings resulted in Huang being fined around $37,000, prompting outcries from rights groups and highlighting how Taiwan handles sexual offenders.
He is not the provider or the creator of the illegal content. Instead, he's in possession of this illegal content.
In fact, Taiwan only recently revised its laws to make possession of these materials a criminal offense.
It is now a criminal offense and could be subject to up to 1 year of imprisonment. And apparently, compared to other countries such as the United States or the United Kingdom, and the penalties in Taiwan against this kind of behavior is still relatively low.
According to the UK-based Internet Watch Foundation, the majority of reported URLs containing child sexual abuse were hosted in the Netherlands, the US, and Slovakia in 2022. However, Taiwan was still the 5th largest host country for this content, accounting for 5% of the global total. And it's a global problem. The site where Huang obtained the material was registered in the United States, had servers in China, and charges customers in Chinese renminbi. Huang was reportedly one of 80 VIP members who paid hundreds of US dollars for access. Although the site has been blocked in Taiwan, the case raises questions about what the government can do to stop websites like it.
The technologies are there. We could filter the content, we could monitor the content, we could check the identity of the users. It's just legally we need to consider our legal values, whether we might compromise the security or the privacy or the freedom of speech.
But the issue goes beyond just stopping the spread of this content and punishing those who produce and sell it. This material can also have devastating, long-lasting effects on the people it depicts.
这样的影像被购买跟曝光的时候，影响它非常大哈，有可能是影响身心的状况，有急性压力。就学部分，学校的人只要知道，同学网络就公审它哈。
The spread of this material online is something that no one wants to imagine, but everyone must face. And while the scope of the problem is global, its impacts can be felt, and perhaps more importantly, solutions can be proposed locally. James Lin and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
The Dajia pilgrimage is wrapping up, and with unseasonable temperatures, many will be wiping the sweat off their brows. Sally Ensign has more.
Crouching under Mazu's sedan, hoping for good fortune. Devotees of this major deity in Taiwan have been following her 8-day pilgrimage through the country, It's physically taxing, and even more so in this atypical heat wave.
今天天气很热哦。现在至少还有风，比昨天好很多了。昨天走的时候还没有什么风，比较闷热。
Scorching hot. It's a sunny day, but you can still see so many people here just to worship the god, the Mazu, the goddess.
Even under the beating sun, worshippers from all over Taiwan push forward to complete this annual pilgrimage. This is Taiwan's biggest religious procession that follows the sea goddess Mazu some 300 kilometers through the country. This year, hundreds of thousands of people have shown up to take part, but for many, the heat is almost unbearable due to an unseasonably warm start to the year. Temperature records have been broken in the last few months, with Taiwan seeing its hottest March day recorded when the mercury almost hit 40 degrees Celsius. According to the health professionals traveling alongside the procession, the extreme heat took its toll.
有遇到太热中暑的，然后后送医院这样子。
今年是最热的一年，所以随行的大家都还蛮辛苦的。
Summer doesn't officially start for another 2 months, but with temperatures already well into the 30s, there are concerns that the rapidly accelerating climate crisis would impact many of Taiwan's traditions.
因为高温的不适，他们已经在考虑要去减少参与的天数，甚至说是改变他参与的形式。过去可能是徒步走完全程，未来他可能考虑会改搭大众运输工具或者其他的方式来完成这个绕境。
As this year's procession winds down, an occasional spring breeze offers these pilgrims some respite. But as extreme temperatures become the norm, the followers of Mazu in this age-old Taiwanese custom are walking into an uncertain future. Lu Fi Li and Sally Ensign in Jianghua County for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, today marks 10 years since hundreds of children died in the Sewol sinking. We look at how the disaster changed South Korea. Stay tuned.
Start your weekend with a cup of coffee and a moment to reflect on what happened this week.
Hello and welcome.
We've got you covered, from defense and politics to high tech and the arts.
Not just to Taiwan, the whole world is watching.
You make the coffee, we make the news. Here's what happened on TaiwanPlus.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, visit us on social media or follow our website at TaiwanPlus.com.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News with me, Leslie Liao. The Solomon Islands are gearing up for elections on Wednesday. Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare is hoping to win an unprecedented second consecutive term. Under his leadership, China has gained a strong foothold in the nation. For more, TaiwanPlus reporter Louise Watts spoke to Ed Kavanagh, CEO of the McKell Institute, an Australian think tank, and author of a new book about the Solomon Islands.
Since the Solomon Islands ditched Taipei in 2019, it's developed a close relationship with Beijing. Could these elections see that change?
It would be very unlikely, no matter the result of the election, to see the Solomon Islands relationship with China completely ended. There are some opposition candidates over the past few years who've suggested that they could actually unpick this switch from 2019 from Taiwan to China. That looks relatively unlikely for various reasons. There's a lot of economic integration and political integration that has happened in the 5 years or so since the switch. But whether or not a new government is formed, and could pursue a slightly more measured relationship with China, that is possible.
What are the main issues in these elections?
Well, from an international perspective, people are, obviously fascinated in the future of this relationship with China, and that is something that's being talked about in the country. The China issue has dominated political and cultural conversation in many ways over the past few years in Solomon Islands. And there are some outside the country that are really viewing this election as effectively a referendum on that China relationship. I think there's a bit there, but we have to be careful in not overemphasizing the China issue in the minds of everyday voters in Solomon Islands. The reality is, for most people in that country, bread and butter issues, just like in every other election in every other country, tend to dominate. You don't have to go far from the capital of Honiara to find appalling degrees of poverty and a lack of services. There's simply no electricity infrastructure, very poor roads and transport infrastructure, almost no health infrastructure in much of the country. Communities know that, and communities are wanting their government to deliver much better service.
That was Ed Kavanagh of Australian think tank the McKell Institute talking to Louise Watt. At least 36 people have died in rainstorms and floods across Pakistan. Heavy storms in the west and center of the country have collapsed buildings and killed dozens. The resulting floods have destroyed more than 85 houses and damaged both crops and livestock, displacing thousands. Officials in Pakistan are responding to calls for aid as forecasters predict more rain.
तो मैंने चेयरमैन एनडीए को कहा है कि वो फौरी तौर पर सूबों के साथ कोऑर्डिनेशन करें और मिलकर एनडीए में और पीडीए में जहाँ जहाँ नुकसान पहुँचा है वहाँ पर इमदादी सामान वहाँ पर पहुँचाया जाए.
Churchgoers in Sydney, Australia have been injured in the city's second high-profile stabbing this week. A 16-year-old boy has been arrested after attacking priests and worshippers during a sermon, leaving 4 people injured. The incident was captured on church livestream, triggering unrest in the Sydney suburb of Wakeley. Police are calling the incident a religiously motivated terrorist attack. The attack comes just days after 6 people were killed in a separate stabbing at a mall in Sydney. China's economy is beating expectations thanks to solid growth in high-tech manufacturing. China's Statistics Bureau announced GDP growth of 5.3% for the first quarter, comfortably meeting the country's 5% growth target. The results also surpassed analysts' predictions. China has been trying to sustain growth amid a property crisis by redirecting spending toward infrastructure and high-tech manufacturing. The production of 3D printing equipment, electric vehicle charging stations, and electronic components all surged by about 40% from a year earlier. It's been 10 years since the Sewol ferry sank off the coast of South Korea, killing hundreds of school children. Harrell Hughes looks at how the disaster changed the country.
Jung Sung-wook sits in his son's bedroom. It's been empty for the last 10 years. His son was one of 304 people killed when a passenger ferry sank off the southern coast of South Korea 10 years ago, in the worst maritime disaster in the country's history. For Jung, it feels like yesterday.
이런 상황이 있으니까 너무 아수라장이었고 한마디로는 지옥이라고 하는 표현이 아마 맞을 거예요. 그러니까.
Most of the people killed were high school students on a school trip. Some documented the disaster on their cell phones as the ferry began to tilt. A voice over the speaker repeatedly telling them to stay put. While the captain and crew members abandoned ship and were the first to be rescued. Within hours, the ferry was underwater, and the families of the passengers unsure and distraught.
거의 2시간인데 왜 못 빠져나와요? 거기 가셔서 해양경찰 아니 그게 어떤 놈이 시간 선시대에 들어가 있으라 그랬냐고 도대체 말이 안 되는 거예요.
The disaster shocked the country. Clear that it was man-made. The ferry had been illegally redesigned and overloaded with cargo. The crew was inexperienced, and the Coast Guard slow to respond. Anger turned into action. There was an intense public response, and in the years that followed, the captain of the MV Sewol ferry was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Crew members were jailed along with employees of the shipping company, which went bankrupt and shut down. The company's owner found dead after a month-long manhunt. And the disaster sparked the process of then-President Park Geun-hye's impeachment. But it's left a much deeper impact on the country.
I think it's equally important to not dismiss the kind of broader cultural change that Sewol disaster and then the movement of the victims, the affected communities has brought about in South Korea. The Sewol disaster was unprecedented in many ways, not just the disaster itself, but the fact that it incited a nationwide movement.
And 10 years on, the victims' families are still pushing for the country to improve its disaster response, to ensure this does not happen again.
저 피해자 가족들이 납득이 되는 납득이 되지 않는 한 계속 저희는 싸울 겁니다. 그 길이 아무리 험한 길이라도 싸워 나갈 거고요.
The sinking of the Sewol ferry continues to affect political and cultural life in South Korea. Each year, yellow ribbons are worn in remembrance and serve as a symbol of the citizen movement powerful enough to bring down a government. Patrick Chen and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, check out these images of the Seville April Fair, a traditional spring festival that runs for 7 days in Spain. I'm Liao. Take care, and I'll see you next time.